Uh, Pleased to see you here because I forgot to send out the reminder a few days ago because I thought it was next week. And in fact, it was only 5 minutes ago that Martin and Sean phoned me up and said, "Where the hell are you?"
As
Um,
it,
and I'm still convinced that it's next week. So, Merry Christmas, for whether it's this week or next week. Anyway, we have three excellent speakers for you today. Uh, but before that, next meetings will be 12th of January, 9th of February, and the 9th of March. So they're the three things we're working towards. We have the Broadside Day in London on February the 22nd. And we have our one-day conference in Sheffield on April the 26th. So there's no escaping from us, people. One thing we could mention, I think Martin's mentioned this in the TSF newsletter, is that these Sunday meetings that we've been having since COVID have been wonderful. I've enjoyed them immensely, but the numbers that come to them are slowly declining. There's only, 24 of us here today. When we started, we were getting 50, even up to 70 people coming. So Martin and I were wondering whether they were worth continuing because the numbers were falling. But looking at the YouTube numbers, they are increasing. So when we add the people who come along later and watch on YouTube, add those to the ones who actually come to the meetings, we still get respectable numbers. We still get 50, 70 people, sometimes maybe more than that, in fact, sometimes hundreds. In other words, it's still worth doing from that point of view, but I don't know if it's worth making you all sit here for an hour and a half on a Sunday when most of you want to watch it at your leisure later on. So we'll think about that. I mean, I enjoy seeing all your faces, but it's possible that we should go to another sort of way of doing it. Maybe we'll have a vote on it. Anyway, for today, we have three papers. We've got John Baxter, David Atkinson, and Mike Betterson with us. Each one of them either Christmas or New Year or silliness themed. So hopefully you'll have a good time, whatever time of year you're going to be watching it. So we're going to start with John Baxter, who is there in a lumberjack shirt. I'm not sure if that's relevant.
he's still muted at the moment.
We can see that, but we can't hear you yet, John.
There we go. I assume you can see the presentation and hear me now.
Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay. So this is nothing terribly academic, just a selection of Christmas songs from the music halls, roughly in chronological order, roughly in reverse order of impact. So the earlier songs I'm talking about will have had more impact on traditional singing than the later ones. Yes. Bear with. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about The Workhouse Boy, which is a close parody of The Mistletoe Bough, a song you may already know. The Workhouse Boy was first published within a few years of The Mistletoe Bough the Mistletoe Bough appearing in the early 1830s. It seems to have been, I don't think it was written for comic effect. It seems to have been written as a serious critique of the workhouses. It appeared alongside articles attacking the Poor Law Amendment Act. We don't really know who wrote it. In one case, it suggested it was by someone called Mr. Flint, but I can't find anything about him. Several other sources suggest it was written by a parochial authority, whatever that means. So I think we'd probably stick to author unknown. It became a comic song through the action of Sam Cowell, who you may know of. He was active from the in the 1850s and 60s, particularly. He did debut as a child actor in America, aged as young as 9, but he started his musical career in Scotland. Okay, so I'm going to move forward. Unusually, we're able to find several reasonably complete reviews of his performances. So here's a review of Sam Cowell singing in Dunfermline in 1853. A concert was given in the music hall last Tuesday by Sam Cowell, famous on the Edinburgh boards for his comic powers. He had the assistance of other singers, good singers in their way, but barely tolerated by the audience, coming before and behind the inimitable Sam. Every song sung by Sam convulsed the audience with laughter, even when he emerged behind the screen on the platform. Before he opened his mouth, the grave, solemn look that he assumed called up an instantaneous outburst of laughter. The Workhouse Boy, the Cork Leg, were masterpieces of humorous singing, or rather acting, or more properly both, delivered with a manner and expression of the most lugubrious gravity. The hall was nearly full. And you can see Sam looking lugubrious in the picture on the right. And here is Stanley Cowell singing a couple of verses of the Workhouse Boy, and you can see how close it is to the original Mistletoe Bough in the comparison there.
The cloth was laid in the workhouse hall, the greatcoats hung on the whitewashed wall. The paupers all were blithe and gay, keeping their Christmas holiday. When the master he cried with a roguish leer, "You'll all get fat on your Christmas cheer." When one by his looks did seem to say, "I'll have some more soup on this Christmas day." Oh, the poor workhouse boy, oh, the poor workhouse boy.
Just to précis the remainder of the song, if you don't know it, they searched above, they searched below, and they couldn't find him. Eventually, it turned out that he had wandered off and fallen into the Christmas soup and therefore been eaten by all his pals. Suitably gruesome, I think, for Christmas. Okay, I don't think anyone's ever written about measuring the impact of traditional songs through the number of titles that a song has. Miss Fogarty's Christmas Cake has an inordinate number of titles. It's been called Miss Fogarty's Christmas Cake, Miss Hooligan's Christmas Cake, Mike Hooligan's Christmas Cake, Miss Fogarty's Cake, Mike Hooligan's Cake, or the Trinity Cake. It was, in fact, not written for the music halls as such, although it was widely sung there. It was written for the American stage in the early 1880s and popularised in Britain and Ireland by Harry Melville. It was words and music were by C. Frank Horn, who also wrote another recipe song, Miss Mulligan's Homemade Pie, which was also published in Boston. Harry Melville started singing the song under the title Slice of Mike Hooligan's Cake in 1885, but it was first published in this country by Charles Sheard in 1886 under the title Miss Hooligan's Christmas Cake. Harry Melville was quite an important figure in that he was successful both in England, Scotland and Ireland and through regularly touring America. And you can see, I think that's an American songster there, Harry Melville's Dublin gem songster. Frank Horn, who wrote the song, was the son of a teamster and a prolific composer who worked in the 1880s, but then appeared to disappear from music publishing. We're not sure why he stopped writing or at least publishing songs. The version that I'm going to play you is by the Spinners, who, in my home growing up, were really the only folk music we had, and I maintain a strong affection for the Spinners. So here they are, singing a verse and chorus of Mrs. Fogarty's Christmas Cake, as they call it.
Mrs. Stay, Tony. There was plums and prunes and cherries. There was raisins and currants and cinnamon too. There was nuts and cloves and berries, but the crust it was nailed on with glue. There was caraway seeds in abundance. It would give yous a fine stomach ache. 'Twould kill any man twice to be eating a slice of Mrs. Hooligan's Christmas cake. As I sat in my window last evening, a letterman came on to me. He'd a nice little neat invitation, saying, won't you come over to tea? Now I knew it was Hooligan sent it, so I went for old friendship's sake. But the first thing they gave me to tackle was a slice of Mrs. Hooligan's cake. Well, it had plums and prunes and raisins and currants.
Okay, sorry to stop me in full flow there, but you get a flavour of the song. I got that wrong. It's actually Mrs. Hooligan's Christmas Cake that they call it. Just to take a sort of slightly philosophical tone for a moment, I have found in my collection of music hall songs that there are an awful lot of question songs. Sometimes the question they ask, they give the answer to, as in, are we downhearted? No. But more usually, the question songs are open-ended. Things like, has anyone here seen Kelly? Has anybody seen our cat? Has anybody seen a German band? Has anyone seen my tiddler? Hello, hello, who's your lady friend? Sing, sing, why shouldn't we sing? Where are the lads of the village tonight? Where did you get that hat? Where do flies go in the winter-time? Why can't it always be Saturday? Why don't you marry the girl? Why is the bacon so tough? So it seems natural to have a couple of question songs around the Christmas theme. So here we have Billy Williams singing Why Don't Santa Claus Bring Something to Me? A tongue-in-cheek tearjerker sung by the man in the velvet suit, called that because he wore a velvet suit.
Another boy next door who was playing with a lot of Christmas toys upon the floor. Said he, where did you get those from? They are a bit all right. The other boy replied, why, Santa Claus brought them last night. That's funny, said the little chap. I hung my stocking too, but Santa Claus forgot me and he's brought them all to you. Why don't Santa Claus bring something to me? Why don't he never call? Other girls and boys get plenty of toys, but I get nothing at all. I've heard of Christmas carols, I've seen a Christmas tree, but I must have been a very naughty, naughty little boy, for he never brings nothing to me.
We'd have to stop him there. So that has been collected from The Singing of Charlie Shavers in 1979, but it's one of those songs that's lost in the business about the British Museum and their computer security, all of that stuff. But anyway, we have another question song to follow it. And I'm just going to play this one now. It's written by Fred Schuff. It was largely successful in the pantomimes. Cheslow and the Bad Pennies.
Oh, that's brilliant. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. It followed her up hill and dale, and fields where grass is blue. So now you know where Mary went, but tell me do. Where does Father Christmas go to in the summertime? Goosey, goosey gander, wherever does he wander? Does he go through the ice and snow to some foreign clime? Where does Father Christmas go to in the summertime?
And it goes on in that way for quite a while, with some verses about Burglar Bill from Pentonville and various other things that have very little to do with Christmas, but the chorus is Christmassy. Okay. We couldn't have a presentation about music hall from me without the great Leslie Cerrone, the man who brought you Isn't It Grand to Be Blooming Well Dead and Why Put a Wall Around a Graveyard. He is also known for singing I Took My Harp to a Party, which appears to be a description of a mixed session in which the person with the harp isn't allowed to... Hello. That's not meant to happen. So I'm going to play you a bit of Leslie Cerrone's version of I Took My Harp to a Party.
Christmas is coming again, but that never thrills me, the thought of it chills me, I tell you it fills me with pain. It makes me remember a Christmas gone by, when I was extremely upset. A night in December, an evening that I would very much rather forget. For I took my harp to a party, but nobody asked me to play. The others were jolly and hearty, but I wasn't feeling so gay. They might have said, play us a thing we can sing, but somehow I don't think they noticed a thing. I took my harp to a party, but nobody asked me to play, so I took the dancing away. Oh.
So the remainder of the song describes how various people get called to sing, but the man with the harp is left bereft. So I've saved the best till last. Please Let Me Sleep on Your Doorstep Tonight. A couple of years ago, Steve talked about Christmas Day in the Workhouse by Billy Bennett and various other people. But this is the B-side of that. It bears a strong relationship to the ballad Dives and Lazarus. And what I wanted to do was have you all listen to it and see whether you think it deserves including under that Roud number. So we end with a question for Steve. Should this Billy Bennett song really be in the Roud Folk Song Index? I'm going to play the whole song.
Here we are, boys. Here's a big mansion. We ought to click here. I'll do the ding-dong. Charlie, you go down with the tit-for-tat.
All right, Bill.
'Twas Christmas Eve at midnight, and a tramp with haggard face was knocking at the door of a rich millionaire's palace. The rich man in pyjamas trimmed with gold and costly fur said, "What are you a-wanting of?" The tramp replied, "Dear sir, please let me sleep on your doorstep tonight. I'm homeless and cold and the snow's falling white. The fire through your keyhole looks cozy and bright. So please let me sleep on your doorstep tonight." The rich man said, "How dare you," in a manner cold and chill, and from his freezing nose he proudly wiped an icy kill. That night while his rich brother slept on silk sheets trimmed with lace, the poor man slept and then the snowflakes fell on his carcase. Please let me sleep on your doorstep tonight. I'm homeless and cold and the snow's falling white. The fire through your keyhole looks cozy and bright. Harmony. So please let me sleep on your doorstep tonight. The rich man called a constable and said, "Remove this man." He shone his lamp. The rich man cried, "Why, it's my brother Dan. You want to sleep upon my doorstep, you, my brother Fred. You shall sleep on my doorstep. I didn't know you when you said, please let me sleep on your doorstep tonight. I'm homeless and cold and the snow's falling white. The fire through your keyhole looks cozy and bright." Harmony. So please let me sleep on your doorstep tonight. The rich man caught pneumonia through standing in the cold, and soon at heaven's pearly gates he claimed his wings of gold. The angel to the rich man said, "You can't come in now." The rich man said, "Well, as it's late and they're full up below, please let me sleep on your doorstep tonight. I'm homeless and cold and the snow's falling white. The fire through your keyhole looks cozy and bright. So please let me sleep on your doorstep tonight." How'd you get on, Charlie?
Not a bean.
We don't want beans.
All right, well, I hope you all heard something new and amusing. I hope you agree that the only thing missing from that ballad was the bit about sitting on a serpent's knee, the rich man going to hell, the poor man dying on the doorstep. It's all there, so I would argue that should definitely be another example of Dives and Lazarus. I thank you all.
Thank you, John. That must be the first time we've had the spinners on these
Yes.
meetings, mustn't it? I think so. That's one up to you. And I thought that "Why doesn't Santa bring me any presents" was very sad. It didn't make me laugh. It was really quite miserable.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm avoiding the question about Dives and Lazarus.
I thought you might.
Yes, but the Miss Fogarty's cake, as an indexer, as you know, I get across with people having different titles. Well, that's why I have to do the index for the titles, but they all have the word cake in them.
Yes.
So here's a lesson to you folks. Just find the keyword and search for that and you'll be all right, whatever they've called it. We have time. We have lots of time for questions or comments from anybody. No. Leslie Cerrone also sang a cover version of The Pig, didn't he? The
Yes, the sow, yeah.
The old sow. And he also did a very funny peg leg dance, which we can't laugh at nowadays because it sort of mocks somebody with a wooden leg. But it was very funny at the time, and you can find that on YouTube.
Yeah.
Anybody want to comment? Thank you very much, John. That was really good. A round of applause for John and his the songs. Okay, we're going to move on then. We're going to move on to David, another of our regular customers from listeners. He's going to talk about Bellman verses, I think.
Okay. Then, beginning.
Yep, we have the picture.
Oh,
We have more than one picture.
yeah, that's okay. That's doesn't need to move on. Right, I'm going to talk about Bellman's sheets to start with, and that's an example of a Bellman's sheet. So you've got some idea of what I'm on about. This is one that belongs to the parish of Croydon in the county of Surrey. So the town or parish bellman was a long-standing office which variously combined the roles of public timekeeper, watchman, and town crier. And there are citations in the Oxford English Dictionary from the 14th century onwards. Drawing on the familiarity of the figure, Thomas Dekker in The Bellman of London from 1608 set up the bellman, pictured here on the title page with his conventional attributes of bell, lamp, and dog, as a literary device, passing through the streets at night and bringing to light contemporary abuses. And the word bellman continues to appear in the titles of subsequent topical and satirical works. The city of Norwich is said to have appointed a bellman as early as 1415, and in London, the diary of Henry Machin records at the beginning of 1557, there is belonging to each ward a bellman who, especially in the long nights, goeth through the streets and lanes ringing a bell, and when his bell ceases, he salutes his masters and mistresses with some rhymes suitable to the festivals and seasons of the year, and bids them look to their lights. The beginning of the custom, which seems to be in the reign of Queen Mary in the month of January 1556, and set up first in Cordwainer Street ward by Alderman Draper, alderman of that ward. Then and there, as I find in an old journal, one began to go all night with a bell, and at every lane's end and at the ward's end gave warning of fire and candle, and to help the poor and pray for the dead. Now, it's not clear from this whether the practice of reciting seasonal verses was customary right from the beginning, but a selection of such verses, titled The Common Calls, Cries and Sounds of the Bellman, was printed in 1628 and issued again in 1639 and probably in 1657. The verses are strongly moralistic, but they're of exactly the same kind as later appeared on Bellman's sheets. The sheets themselves, which survived from shortly after the Restoration, belong with a long-established custom of servants, including public servants and apprentices, soliciting gratuities at Christmas and New Year. Samuel Pepys makes several references to Christmas gratuities in his diary, and the verses themselves sometimes give voice to the expectation of reward. Bless all my masters, and grant they may be to their poor bellman bountiful and free, as it says on a sheet from 1712, printed for Lawrence Lester, bellman of the Vintry ward. The earliest known bellman's sheet as such is from 1666, printed for Thomas Law of St Giles, Cripplegate. That one. There are also sheets printed for his presumed successor, William Briscoe, which is this one, from the following 2 years. Another early example was printed for the first bellman of Hackney in 1668. In view of the bellman's role in warning of fires, it might be suspected that the practice took off in the wake of the Great Fire of 1666. By 1833, however, William Sands was writing that the sheets were beginning to die out. In some places, though getting nearly obsolete, the bellman goes round with a copy of verses wishing a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. On some of the 18th and 19th century sheets, the office of bellman is combined with or superseded by that of other parish officials, variously beadle, constable, headborough, crier, sexton, steeplekeeper, but the nature of the sheets remains the same. Right at the beginning of the 20th century, a local notes and queries column describes how the Bellman and his verses had survived in towns such as Colchester and Norwich. Several hundred Bellman sheets are known to survive, the earliest and most numerous of them associated with London parishes. And for that reason, the London sheets provide something of a paradigm, but this was not a peculiarly metropolitan phenomenon, and sheets survive in varying quantities from Banbury, Bristol, Bury St Edmunds, Cambridge, Canterbury, Chatham, Chipping Norton, Dorchester, Great Yarmouth, Hereford, Ipswich, Maidstone, Norwich, Southampton, and Stamford. More than 100 sheets survive from Norwich from the 1760s right up until the death of the bellman William Childerhouse in 1905. The sheets themselves vary in size, but they're generally large, typically in the region of 45 by 35 centimetres. Some of the earlier examples are smaller, some later ones larger. The sheets from the 1660s are not illustrated and could be said to be not unlike the sheets of political verses of that time. By the 1680s, though, they typically have a single stylized woodcut showing the bellman and his dog. By the mid-18th century, they're typically headed with a large woodcut of the bellman and other members of the watch outside a stylized church building, while down the margins and at the foot of the sheet are smaller woodcuts showing scenes from the life of Christ. A variant is a sheet from the parish of St George the Martyr, which lacks the marginal woodcuts but has a prominent plan of the parish, along with a few biblical scenes at the foot. In the 19th century, some of the sheets moved to wood engraving and more modern-looking images, but still retained much of the appearance of the 18th century. Others introduced new iconography, decorative borders of seasonal foliage, and a scene around the punch bowl headed with joy and mirth your spirits cheer, Christmas comes but once a year. You also get a selection of fashionable domestic and social vignettes and sentimental Victorian images which depict the child lost and the child found. You might be able to just about read those captions at the top of the page. Bellman's sheets printed for towns outside of London are sometimes simpler in appearance, with fewer and or different woodcuts, but the general impression is that they don't differ in any more fundamental way. The Norwich sheets, printed William Childerhouse, bellman from 1877, do represent something of a change in that the only iconography is now the city coat of arms, and some of the addresses to national and civic worthies are in prose rather than verse. The verses themselves were produced year after year and are formulaic, revisiting the same seasonal, pious and patriotic themes. A transition can be traced over time from piety towards patriotism and towards an increased topicality and news value as the 19th century dawned. The 1751 sheet, for example, neatly combines verses about Saints Michael, Luke, Crispin, Stephen, and John with verses on the King's birthday. So on St Michael, with impudence rebellious Satan strove, and his weak power against his Lord would prove. But good Saint Michael, with great power given, soon drove the bold invader down from heaven. There in eternal chains he howling lies, living in flames that never, never dies. And on the same sheet we have the King's birthday. This is the day our sovereign George was born, the British crown and sceptre to adorn, a prince of mercy, justice, truth, and love, a blessing sent to us by God above, to save Britannia from Rome's hellish spite and drive rebellion to the shades of night. The verses on royalty, politics, and public affairs are predictably deferential, patriotic, optimistic, and Protestant. The topical verses do not fill the same purposes as reports in newspapers, but rather that of the early modern, quote, news ballad. They're intended not so much as to inform as to draw a moral and an ideology from the occurrences of the preceding year. And read with due caution, the Bellman's sheet provide us with a useful record of, quotes, official sentiment at a parish level. From a critical perspective, this is at best workmanlike verse, but equally one can admire the variety that it does achieve. And from the historian's perspective, it is socially functional poetry. It also provides a record of the incumbent officials in numerous parishes over a long period of time. By the middle of the 18th century, the Bellman was not alone in issuing seasonal verses in the hope of recompense. The Gazetteer and New Daily Advertiser reported in 1765, "At this season of the year, it has always been customary, the lower part of the world, to express their gratitude to their benefactors, while some of a more elevated genius among them clothe their thoughts in a kind of holiday dress, and once in the year rise into poets. Thus the Bellman bids good night to all his masters and mistresses in couplets. The news carrier hawks his own verses, and the very lamplighter addresses his worthy customers in rhyme." The heyday of lamplighters came in the mid-18th century with the rather slow implementation of street lighting in English towns, and lamplighter's verses start to appear from around the same time. Sheets survive from London and Norwich, the earliest currently identified being from London in 1742. And most of the London examples are from the 18th century. There's a particularly fine run of sheets printed for the Society of Lamplighters in Norwich, with dates from the 1780s through to the 1870s. The London sheets are typically dominated by a single woodcut showing the Guildhall, and in the foreground, a lamplighter knocked off his ladder by a passing coach, with the caption, "This is our fate." The lamplighter's occupation was certainly vulnerable to accidents, which were sometimes reported in the press. A report from 1765 records a deliberate assault. Tuesday evening, a lamplighter lighting his lamps in Pall Mall, some chairman at play flung down his ladder, and he was so much hurt by the fall that he was obliged to be sent to St. George's Hospital. His chief cry was, having a wife and 5 small children, he should not be well enough in time to collect his Christmas box. And what is remarkable, he met with much the same accident about this time last year. Other scenes depicted include the Mansion House, St. Paul's Cathedral, and the Lord Mayor's show by Land and Water. Additional marginal woodcuts show the lamplighter going about his work and falling from his ladder, as well as images of saints and allegorical figures. A London sheet headed with a plan of John Rennie's New London Bridge probably dates from the 1820s. The verses themselves are not usually divided up into short poems on particular subjects in the manner of Bellman's verses, but rather dwell in some detail on the hardships and public benefits of the lamplighter's trade. With further seasonal animadversions and an appeal for reward. The 1742 sheet, for example, lauds the achievements of Admiral Vernon and General Wentworth, but later sheets have less in the way of topical material. There is, though, an exception in the form of a number of gas lamplighters sheets dating from around the 1830s. They are heavily illustrated with scenes such as the interior of the gasworks, drawing the retorts and the gasometer. You can probably see a couple of the captions for those. You can see the gasometer over on the left. And verses describe how the gas was manufactured. But take note. First, the retorts are placed in furnace strong, mid fires intense, which rages there among. The workman then the red retort attends, place the black mineral, then the gas ascends, through pipes behind into the hydraulic main, and further urged it then descends again, as well as inevitably a picture you can see over on the right of the lamplighter falling from his ladder. From the 1750s, newsmen or news carriers had sheets printed for them which carried the same sort of appeal for generosity at Christmas. These are half-sheet slips, more modest than the typical Bellman's or Lamplighter's sheet, with verses that, as well as a seasonal address, cast a glance back over the events of the previous year, such as the Lisbon earthquake of 1755 or the victories of Frederick the Great. Some are without illustration, while others advertise the newsman's wares. This example shows three figures, two male and one female, crying variously the St. James's Evening Post, the London Spy, and Reed's Weekly Journal. Given the nature of their occupation, one may imagine that the newsmen cried the verses aloud in the streets. One concludes, "And though cold freeze the rivers as hard as the rocks, may it ne'er freeze the hand that gives our Christmas box." Another carries an appeal printed in large bold front across the foot of the page, which you probably just about read here. "Reader, for this sheet, if you are willing, I would thank you to fork over a shilling." Yeah. Okay. Contemporary comments affirm that verses distributed by the Bellman over the Christmas and New Year period were a familiar part of 18th century urban life. Early in the century, a piece in the Tatler drew to a close as, quote, "The Bellman went about with an annual sort of poetry, which I had like to have forgot, though I have for many years with joy observed it to be a forerunner, mince pies and plum porridge." Contemporary newspapers provide some evidence that the Christmas verses were recited out loud, and also that such nighttime disturbances were not always welcome. One correspondent wrote to a newspaper to complain about being woken at night by the city waits with their, quotes, "very indifferent music," and by the Bellman, quotes, "and his less musical verses." And the writer also took the opportunity to complain about the custom of giving Christmas boxes to servants. All of these, he thought, were popish customs, the bells and music imitating the heavenly host proclaiming the Messiah's birth. And Christmas gratuities, he said, provided the wherewithal for servants to purchase indulgences. In the end, he just sounds like Scrooge avant la lettre. At 2 o'clock on a Sunday morning in 1769, it was reported, Bellman of a parish was going his rounds, repeating his verses on the New Year, when he was insulted by a publican, and a fight ensued, in which the publican was heartily drubbed. More sympathetically, the approach of Christmas in 1780 reminded a correspondent of the verses annually spoken by the Bellman, none of which could exceed those of the worthy musician of Fulham. "As for the Pope and the Pretender, Lord down Fulham, and bless my masters and mistresses all at Fulham. May every sick man soon become a well man, and send him store of crop to tip the Bellman." The lines are not untypical of the sort of thing that was printed on Bellman's sheets, although these exact lines from Fulham have not come to light. Contemporary records like these suggest there was no real distinction to be drawn between printed and recited verses. The model for all the sheets, then, is that there is an element of street trading, including vocal recitation, involved in their dissemination. The transactions were generally of not quite the same kind as those involved in selling ballads, but they were not entirely different either. As literature, Bellman's poetical effusions became something of a byword for homely verse or doggerel, especially for anyone with cultural pretensions of their own. And here are a few examples. The Bellmans and the Marshals' strains, extracted from the dullest brains, are now rewarded for their pains. Trifling 'twould be to waste my precious time on such as would disgrace the bellman's rhyme. When Christmas comes, each bellman is a bard, nor rules by Horace claim old Tom's regard. But these are perhaps the wrong criteria. The ideology of the verse, as I've already mentioned, and can be extended to the entire sheet. Iconography, mise-en-page, title, imprint, text and paratext alike, representing a visual, lexical, and aural embodiment of the life of the urban parish within its framework of social, political, and religious convention, endlessly repeated down the years. If the sheet were displayed as decoration, and they do have a visual appeal, it would stand as an everyday reminder of the prevailing order of things. In other words, Bellman's and Lamplighters' sheets have a social and aesthetic value that can see them classified as a kind of literature of the street. Others, such as the newsmen's sheets, are more akin to advertising handbills, not least in consequence of their more modest format. At least the sheets would have had some value because paper itself is of value, for wrapping and lining things, for instance. The sheets that survive are usually unique, and on that material basis, the genre classifies as ephemera. On the other hand, given that the print runs were presumably quite short, the fact that several hundred unique sheets are still extant is noteworthy in itself. There are individual ballads and chapbooks which are thought to have been printed in rather larger quantities that are believed not to have survived at all. Of course, it is fruitless to try and delimit street literature on the one hand and ephemera on the other. For one thing, the former is essentially a material category, the latter a largely cultural one. But the Bellman's and Lamplighter sheets inhabit an interesting transitional zone between the two. Thank you.
Very much, David. That really was very interesting and worthy of repeating at the broadside day, except for the fact we've already got a full program. But keep it in hand just in case.
Yes.
I've got a couple of questions. First of all, the Bellman seems to have a sort of overlap to the Waits, the ones who went round, playing music, but also watching out for fires and that sort of stuff. But I can't remember seeing any Waits sheets. I can't remember any reference to them selling.
No, I haven't come across anything while I was looking at the Bellmans and other ones. Presumably that's because the Waits were more sort of musicians rather than poets.
I suppose so. Yeah. Yes, maybe the answer. And the other thing, the newsman seemed to expect a shilling. The newsboy.
I think that's
a joke.
Well, it might be a joke. It might be just pushing his luck. The Bellmans and Lamplighters ones, it's very much the impression of the servant class, sort of appealing humbly to my masters and mistresses, and a lot of them are headed. This is humbly addressed to my masters and mistresses of the parish of Croydon or wherever it happens to be. It's sort of maintaining a custom, and one imagines, and I'm making this up, but that the newsmen were much more pushy sort of people.
As they are nowadays, yes.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking. I've got no proof for that, but it seems not unreasonable. And the parish, the Bellman was a parish official, so he kind of had to know his place.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, an ordinary broadside at that time, at any time, would be selling for a penny.
Yeah.
Or tuppence. But of course, in this case, that, as you say, they're not selling to the poor. They're trying to get money from the richer people. So they're not really selling the sheet. They're just
No, they're not. Then yeah, certainly the Bellman and Lamplighters, they're not selling. They're hoping for a penny in as a sort of Christmas box, and if they happen to live in a well-heeled ward, they might hope for a bit more from some of the inhabitants.
And presumably the print runs. I mean, most of them are quite specific to the parish.
Oh, they virtually all are, yes. Well, certainly the Bellman's ones, they're all very specific.
So the print run would be limited to.
I think it must have been.
How many rich people live in your parish, as you say? Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Yes, I would have thought they. I mean, if the print run for a ballad was, maybe a couple of thousand. I mean, people give figures like that, though I don't think we really have much evidence. I would have thought these would be, a couple of hundred would be pushing it.
Yeah, and they're quite ornate, aren't they, from a printing point of view?
Yes. I suspect that the printers kept the ornate stuff as kind of standing type and would vary the verses around within them, and you can find the same poem cropping up on different sheets at different dates. I mean that wouldn't necessarily be kept in standing type, but there's quite a lot of recycling. But so I think the iconography would be more like something that the printer would keep in stock.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've got quite a bit on the printers, which I didn't include today because that's perhaps a bit specialised for some people. But there are a number of printing firms that specialise in these things, and there's some crossover with ballad printers, though perhaps not quite as much as I think I expected when I started looking at them. The 18th century, what's his face, Larkin Howe in Whitechapel, he printed ballads and these sorts of things. But by the time you're in the 19th century, the printers like Quick and so forth, they seem to be sort of general jobbing printers and possibly even printing in the low end of the sort of literary trade, but they don't seem to print ballads.
Right, sorry. I haven't asked anybody else if they want to say anything. Does anybody want to raise a question? And Martin, have you?
I was just going to say I haven't done anything like as much on these as David has, but you're mentioning printers. Raynal was reported to use the same sheet for several different Bellman, simply changing the Bellman's name and the parish accordingly on the sheet. And they said that they've been in business for over 100 years of Bellman's verses from 1735, so very long-lived.
Yes, that's true. I think that Raynal inherited a previous printer's business.
Yeah.
I've got all that written down somewhere, but I can't remember. I'm not sure if I've actually found exactly the same one printed for different parishes. I can't remember, but certainly the content is recycled for different parishes by Raynald and also other printers as well. But yeah, Reynolds is a big name in it, and it was obviously a long standing thing, and I guess they just sort of cornered the market.
Right, unless anybody else got a question or comment? No?
Could I ask, sorry, I can't indicate.
Oh, yes, Frankie.
Well, whether this was as common in Wales or not, because none of the places mentioned. Hereford was the nearest that got to Wales.
I haven't come across, I mean, that list was, I think, is fairly comprehensive of the sheets that have survived, as far as I'm aware. I don't think they're so likely. I wonder, I don't know if Welsh parishes were organised in the same sort of way. There might have been in the big towns, I suppose. And also, I suppose in the 18th century, would you be looking for things in Welsh language? I don't know.
I would have thought so. What about Scottish? Were there any Scottish ones in your list?
I don't think there were.
Well, so
Yeah, you took my main question, which was about relation between waits, Christmas waits, and Bellman. So I think that's been answered. But I was just wondering, were Bellman predominantly an urban phenomenon?
Yes, I think so. I think so. I mean, certainly, all the surviving sheets are from towns, right? Obviously, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it'd be fairly easy to find out a bit more about Bellman from historians, but yes, I think it's an urban thing.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much, David. That was very enlightening, very interesting. And our third speaker today is Mike Atkinson. He's going to tell us about an old horse. Is that right, Mike?
He's got to unmute.
I've unmuted, I think.
You're unmuted, yep.
Let's, is that, no, not that one. Can't see a thing.
It says the end of the slideshow.
Oh, let's start from the beginning, shall we?
We've missed it.
It was going so well in rehearsal.
Of course. And I'm sure somebody's going to say flogging a dead horse here. Never mind, we won't say that.
Well, you said it.
Yeah, I've said it now.
Has that gone back to the beginning?
It says the end of the slideshow again. Ah.
I'm going to whip. I can't think of another way. Right.
Okay.
Okay. You can see it now, yes?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Good. Okay. Now, I know there are many collected songs and broadside variants of the Poor Old Horse from all around the country, really. But this one, it's a 6-verse song, currently performed on the 2 weekends before Christmas, visiting various pubs in the Dales, and then on Christmas Eve morning in and around the market square of Richmond in North Yorkshire itself. The song is about, has been all of them really, about a horse that starts off young and fit, gradually grows old, and then dies. When the song finishes, then the horse stands up again, and usually drink is then taken. I moved up to County Durham in 1991, not far from the North Yorkshire border, about 18 miles from Richmond. And through an acquaintance, I heard about the Poor Old Horse custom. But as now, appearances are never advertised. So it wasn't easy to track it down, first of all. But I eventually did, and I went and attended a number of performances over a few years. Then in 2009, they found that they didn't have a melodeon player for that year, and someone suggested me. Now, not being a current or past resident of Richmond, this caused quite a lot of debate, apparently, in the team. But eventually, they decided, as there was no one else, they'd have me. But it was going to be just for that year. But I've now been performing with them ever since. The original performances were in the hands of one family grouping, the Pierces and the Wards, and it seems that they stopped performing sometime in the 1950s. Then a bit later in the early 1980s, a group of people, including someone called Mick Sheehan, who some might know from the folk scene, approached the family, this chap called Bill Ward, and asked if they could revive the custom. He agreed as long as he could lead the performances. But then they had to find a horse. Now, Bill said when they stopped performing, they buried the horse's head they were using at the time in the garden. well, the garden is more like a field, and so they started to dig up this to try and find the horse's head. Couldn't find it. Eventually gave up. So Bill said, "Well, you'll have to go to the knacker's yard and get another horse's head." So the story goes that a couple of people went off and came back with a shire horse's head, which no one could lift. So that was taken back to the knacker's yard. They got a horse's head of a suitable size, and then Bill said, "What we do, we bury it in the ground for a year, let the worms do their business, and then dig it up, and off we go." So they did this, dug it up after a year, and the worms hadn't really done enough of their job. So a tin bath was found. It was stuck in there, boiled up, and eventually they ended up with a horse's skull, which could then be decorated with astrakhan and the eyes of the bottom of wine bottles ground off at the bottom. So that got there. Right. So but that's Bill on the left there. And when he was still performing, I've got a recording of you talking. There's a lot of background noise of people trying to play Christmas carols in the background. It's a bit difficult to hear, but I'd like to play it because it's the only recording I've found of Bill actually talking about it.
Well, it goes back hundreds of years. We don't know exactly how far back, but really it's something that's come down from pagan times. In the celebrations, they would carry horses' heads or rams' heads, possibly decorated with evergreens, holly and ivy. This one, the first written description of it was, I think, about 1840. That's when it was put into a book, and it was noted then. But it was possibly going on hundreds of years before that in Richmond. I have a photograph taken in about 1893, where my grandfather is under the horse, and he'd be in his early 20s, he'd be about 24 or 25 maybe. And one of my aunties is on there, a little 3-year-old girl, And all the men, there's three men with the horse, and they're all blacked up. That's the earliest photograph we've got of it.
Bill stopped performing in 2010, but he always came out to watch, and he'd be there on the first spot on Christmas Eve morning at 9 o'clock, looking at his watch and making sure that the team was there to start on time. This rather blurred picture was taken in 2012, the Christmas before he died. That's him in the middle, in mufti, if you like, not in the red coat. He was also an excellent painter, and that large oil painting you can see above everyone at the back still hangs in Richmond Town Hall, and Bill painted that. If you're ever in Richmond and the town hall's open, you can pop in and see the painting. It's worth watching. Worth looking at. Julia Smith, in her book Fairs, Feasts and Frolics, Customs and Traditions in Yorkshire, which was published in 1989, talks about the poor old horse and interviewed Bill. And you see where I put the arrow there. Bill says here that he learned the song from his grandmother, Isabella Pierce, and that is the version that we sing today. It was published here in Bell and Dixon, 1857. I'm sure a number of you are familiar with this book. It's Bell's update of Dixon's book of 1846, which I haven't had a look at. I'm sure someone might be able to dash to their library if they got that and tell me if it was in that first edition. I don't know. But this is from the 1857 book, and you can see at the top there the Mummers Song, or the Poor Old Horse, as sung by the Mummers in the neighbourhood of Richmond, Yorkshire, at the merry time of Christmas. It then says the rustic actor who sings the following song is dressed as an old horse, and at the end of every verse the jaws are snapped in chorus. Sounds a bit odd to me, because if he's in the horse, it'd be really muffled sound, but hey ho, who knows. This book was published in 1977, and it collated a series of articles from the Richmond and Ripon Chronicle in 1888 under the pen name of an old Richmond lad who was a chap actually called William Wise. who was then an inhabitant of Northallerton, which is 16 miles away, but he was born and bred in Richmond. He explained that he had recently revisited his birthplace and had been grieved to find it so greatly altered from what he remembered of it as a boy, i.e. in the 1820s and 1830s. So it's memories of 50 years plus back. So you can see there, this is the article. The most exciting Christmas custom was that of the poor old horse, which perambulated the town from one public house to another. And he then prints the song, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 verses, as now. Not exactly the same, but I quite like the last paragraph, where he said, the evening's entertainment concluded when they could no longer stand on their feet. That doesn't happen these days, of course. Right. Now, anyone who's researched the James Madison Carpenter collection will be familiar with a document like this, because that's how they're all is typed up. Field notes were done. Now, you can see at the top, Frank Pierce is Bill Ward's uncle. Edward Pierce is Bill's maternal granddad. And it says, Mr. Pierce suggested that it's thought that Old Horse originated at a John Peel dinner. I mean, perhaps Sue Allen can tell us later what a John Peel dinner is. I have no idea. I'm going to play... I'm going to play a bit of John Madison Carpenter cylinder recording of the song. It's someone singing the Poor Old Horse. It's the same tune we have today. It says on the cylinder, it's an unnamed singer, Yorkshire, near the Scottish border. So I don't know where Carpenter quite thought he was at the time. It's not the words you're seeing in front of you, but it is the Poor Old Horse song. I'll play that.
What's it about? Once I was a young boy, I am young boy forever. My master used to ride on me and serve me very fine. But now I'm grown older, my age will go before, but I never fit to ride upon, for in your carriage to go. Poor old house.
Carpenter also collected the song in Barnard Castle. This is quite interesting because I can't find anywhere else, any in the local paper or anything about the Poor Old Horse happening in Barnard Castle. But Bill did tell me once when I was chatting to him that they used to go away for 2 or 3 weeks sometimes to other places with the horse, probably just to raise some more money, because that's what they did. They collected for themselves at the time. So I think what must have happened here is they might have gone and stayed with this person, Thomas Winter, in Barnard Castle, and he learnt the song from that. That's my only thought on that one. Right. I've only got one sort of video, if you like, of us doing it. This is a small group that would go out. This is in the weekends before Christmas. This filmed by our driver for the night, Neil Diamond, very kindly. It's at the George and Dragon, Hudswell, which is a community-owned pub, one of the first community-owned pubs. If you're ever in Hudswell, just outside Richmond, worth visiting. And it was just a small team out that evening. But I'm going to add, after the polished performance by the Spinners, this is completely the opposite. It was the last stop of the evening. We'd already done 6 pubs that night. So I'm going to hold my hands up and say it is what it is. But you do get all verses. So here's us.
very, very fine. But now I am grown old, my nature doth decay. My master frowns upon me, and thus I heard him say, poor old horse, poor old horse. Once I was fed upon, sir, the best of corn and hay, down in yon fields you grow, sir, or in any meadow gay. But now, alas, that is not so, I have no friends at all. I'm forced to nibble the short grass that grows beneath yon wall. Poor old horse, poor old horse. I used to be well tended, all in my stable warm, to keep my tender body from any cold or harm. But now I'm just adrift, so in the open fields to go, to face all kinds of weather, cold winds and frost and snow. Poor old horse, poor old horse. Freely I will give my body to the hounds, but rather die than live. So taking whip and strip, into the huntsman let him go. He's neither fit to ride upon, nor any spur to draw. Poor old horse, poor old
So that's the custom. Thanks for watching that.
Thank you, Mike. That was much better than the spinners, wasn't it? Of course it was. Excellent. So Sue's got a hand up. She's worked out how to put the hand. We'll talk about putting up hands in a minute, but Sue, put your hand up. That's good.
Thank you. First of all, I don't know what the Yorkshire John Peel nights were like. I know what the Cumbrian ones were like, which would be a dinner, lots of drinking, perhaps even a John Peel song competition. And within hunting circles, there are wider groupings, but I don't know about Yorkshire ones. But about that song, I was just going to say it was in the Westmoreland Folk Song Competition in Kendal in 1903, and it was sung by a Mr. Barber there, a local guy, and Frank Kidson was the judge. Oh, I don't know whether he came first or second. I'm just looking at my database to see. It doesn't say. I can tell you the date it was, but no, I can't tell you whether he came first, second, or third. Frank Kidson liked that version, though. He said it was a good one. It's also published in John Stokoe's Songs and Ballads, Northern England, 1892. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention enough. Did you mention Dixon?
Yes.
Because Mike asked about whether it's in Dixon. I can't see it in Dixon actually, but I can't call up my index while we're looking at this screen. I noticed that the earlier ones did have black faces. Well, one black face, and the interview with Bill mentioned black.
I think, like with a lot of customs, that was abandoned. Even when I started, on the Christmas Eve morning, the children that came out with us had their faces blacked up, but that no longer happens.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that it no longer happens. I was wondering whether that had lasted into.
I had thought it was in the Songs of the Falpax book, but actually it isn't. What I was thinking of was the song called The Place Where the Old Horse Died, which is different again.
Anybody else? No, right. Splendid. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for.
Frankie's got her.
Oh, Frankie.
Yes.
Did you want something, Frankie?
If you unmute.
I can't see Frankie on my screen. Oh, there. Right. have to. That's it.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Yes.
Just to say, recently I heard Mick Thames here in South Wales sing a couple of versions of Poor Old Horse, very different tune, but both of them were to a very specific horse. One I remember pulled your wagons around Mumbles, just outside on the coast outside Swan. But actually, very specifically named the horse, but went through the similar story and chorus to a different tune. So very, very, we've got the Mary Lloyd revived here in South Wales again, largely due to the Lantrisant Folk Club, I think. But as well as Richmond, it's alive and well and dying here in South Wales.
Alive and well and dead. Right, before we go, ladies and gentlemen, we got some confusion about raising hands. It used to be you go down to reactions and there it says raise hand, but for my screen at the moment, I go down to react and it doesn't say, and in fact, I can't find a raise hand anywhere on my screen.
The reason for that, Steve, the reason for that is co-hosts and hosts cannot raise their hands.
But I'm not a co-host.
Oh no, you're not this time, are you?
No, that's
I
why
beg
I'm
your
asking.
pardon.
Not the arrow beside it.
It's not the arrow beside it. You press the heart, and that will give you.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay, that's where it is.
If you click on the arrow, it just gives you play a chime and recognize hand gestures. Okay.
I'm in a meeting at the moment.
So you click on the heart and you can raise your hand and also say be right back. Okay, right. Thank you for that. I'll remember to remind people next time. Well, thank you everybody for coming. I hope, please don't forget, whoever does it, is it Martin or Elaine, to record the chat, because lots of people have put comments in there about whether we're continuing the Sunday meetings or not, and I haven't had a chance to read them, so we'll record those and report back to you. So I know it's only early December, but Merry Christmas and Happy New Year and all that stuff.
Christmas.
And we'll see you again in January. All right, thank you for coming.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Merry Christmas.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Merry Christmas.
Bye, everyone. Merry Christmas.